When I was first asked to write a poem about a cemetery, my first reaction was I don't even know if I could. What I really wanted to do was find a personal connection. And looking at it, I found out that my great-grandfather was buried here, when he got back from World War I, he bought a piano, which is the piano in my living room, which my daughter, who's right over here, who's 7, who is learning to play the piano on this piano. So there's sort of a connection with the old and the new. At Lacey Madden's grave, I'm thinking about the Battle of Vimy Ridge and Hannah, Montana, the pop starlet my daughter dreams of in hues of burnt sugar and sass. I don't know for sure if Lacey fought at Vimy, but I do know his regiment did, and that he had left England and arrived in Saskatoon only a few months before going to war for this country that had just taken him in. Lacey took a bullet on the battlefield, and a surgeon shortened his arm and drew a picture of what he had done, so to explain things to the doctor back home. Lacey came back from the war and moved west, where he bought a piano on Granville Street from a store that closed and became a mortuary. So here it is, music and death, and my daughter in my living room pecking out Hannah, Montana on Lacey Madden's piano. Can you believe it? They were able to make pop music worse. I'm trying to read the cemetery. I'm trying to forget poltergeist, zombie skin, and the bitter braille of horror's myopic blunder, and the poor young men who recently came to the cemetery on a public day dressed as zombies, only to be greeted by a Filipino choir and a lecture on Chinese burial rites. How do we take death seriously? How do we find the funniest person buried in the earth? The men from the Second Narrows Bridge are in the ground. Japanese coolies who built the railway. Joe Forte, who himself must have kept a dozen people out of this cemetery. I'm trying to imagine the cemetery as parchment. I'm trying to see the punctuation in the minor story. Harry Jerome crossing the finish line in '64, but also the man in the crowd who watched him do it, but whose memories weren't preserved in the molasses of bronze effigy, but are instead kept in a shoebox to be sold on a garage sale 10 blocks south of here on some static Sunday. Or I imagine the veterans whose headstones sat atop rocks, and the man who pulled up these rocks and trucked them down to Stanley Park to set them in the seawall. Where do we connect with the past if not in these acres of peace in the city? This park, the lavender in an infant stream, where marble text knocks our lives down to haiku and sunshine. There is a garden in the heart of the cemetery where thousands of river rocks have been placed. I'm thinking now of the importance of ritual and whether we think we deserve it. Each of the river rocks is a marker for a child to have their name on a stone, whereas until now their life has gone unmarked. How does a death or a life change each stone? A few years ago, a man renovated the top floor of a house in Toronto. He stripped and smashed the walls in, and when he found a package bundled in newspaper, it felt as light as paper, and he was sure that he had found money. But when he cut the bundle open, he found a perfectly mummified 4-month-old baby girl, a little younger than one of his own children. So after 80 years, here was a stranger's grief over a child that was 50 years his senior. And here, think of loss. Think of the mother back in the 20s who wrapped her child in newspaper and her husband who plastered that child into the wall. I'm thinking of ritual, of naming the world in sugar and salt, of hearing the blood thunk of a collapsing bridge, of tapping out a tune on Lacey Madden's piano, of seeing Harry Jerome cross the finish line so fast that he turned to bronze, of remembering a child who died so young, no one knows her grave. Thank you very much.